There are few things possibly more difficult to handle in our lives than the issues that come about with money. I would imagine that there's not a person in here over the age of about 12 that hasn't had money issues. Do I hear an amen to that? Any of you know what I'm talking about, money issues? Okay, I thought so. Most of us live in a time and a season and a life phase where money is an issue. And today we're going to look at a problem that the Jews faced while they were trying to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. We're studying the book of Nehemiah, so I want to invite you while I give a little background to go ahead and turn to the book of Nehemiah. Turn to chapter 5 because that's what we'll be reading in just a couple of moments. But when last week we looked at Nehemiah faced his enemies, and he stood up to them and he prayed and he didn't listen to them. And we learned that even Jesus said to bless your enemies, to love your enemies. And so we learned ways that we could handle enemies. But the work of the Lord stopped because of money problems. Now understand something. The wall was torn down 70 years. And the Lord, or the Father, sends Jeremiah, let me say it again. God sends Nehemiah back to rebuild the walls. And it took them only 52 days. It's miraculous. But in the midst of those 52 days, the people began to run out of money. And when you run out of money, when you run out of food, things just shut down. And so that's what was happening. There's a major crisis. The landowners were selling their property to feed their families. People were selling their children into slavery just so that they could eat. Can you imagine moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, selling your child so that you could eat? I'm watching my daughter back there just saying, no, that would never happen. What do you do when you have no options to survive? Giving your child away that they would be fed by the owner, that you might have food for your child and food to sustain yourself. That's the kind of thing that was going on. So would you look with me as we begin in Nehemiah chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. It says, now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. Some were saying, we and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and to stay alive, we must get grain. Others were saying, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine. Still others were saying, we have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards, although we are the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though and though our children are as good as theirs, yet we have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and the officials. I told them, you are charging your own people interest? So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, as far as possible, we have bought back our fellow Jews who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are selling your own people only for them to be sold back to us? They kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. So I continued, what you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God and avoid the approach of the Gentiles' enemies? I and my brothers and my men are also lending the people money and grain. But let us stop charging interest. Give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you are charging them. 1% of the money, grain, new wine, and olive oil. We will give it back, they said. And we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. Then I summoned the priests and made the nobles and the officials take an oath to do what they had promised. I also shook out the folds of my robe and said, in this way may God shake out of their house and possessions anyone who does not keep this promise. So may such a person be shaken out and emptied. That's the passage we're going to be looking at today. And there's a lot going on. For us, it's like, wow, this official thing just took place. But what is going on? I want you to know that there are three things that they were having trouble with in the area of money. Number one, they had a cash flow problem. Number two, they had an inflation problem. And number three, they had debt problems. Cash flow, inflation, debt. Does that sound anything like you've ever known of? Have you ever heard of that? Do you know anyone that's experienced that? Is it happening in your house? Did I hear an amen? Okay, this is the kind of society that we have become more accustomed to. But here it is, these are Jews, and this is happening to them because of one another. They're inflicting the harm to one another. The cash flow. There's families that cannot feed their own children. They're starving, they're desperate. They don't have the money to take care of them. And they're complaining, but notice, they're not complaining about the king, not first. They're complaining about one another. They're complaining because they're in a desperate situation because of the one another's. They are inflicting harm to their own brothers and sisters because they're charging them interest. These people are in trouble. Second thing, the inflation. There's high prices, there's low income. That's not a good combination, is it? Don't we like high income and low prices? We got to reverse. They are suffering. They're in an inflated situation, and they're selling their possessions, they're selling their properties, they're doing anything they can to survive. And then they've just got debt problems. Here's what it says, verse 4 and 5. Again, we have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. And then they're pointing out the difference. Here we are, brothers and sisters as Jews. Here we are, family. And although we are the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though our children are as good as theirs, yet we have to subject our sons and our daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and vineyards belong to others. They got in a desperate situation. You know what happens, don't you? I mean, y'all know those places that make loans, 30-day loans? You familiar with them? Yeah, okay. So what they do, you're in a bad situation. They say, we'll loan you cash. We'll give you $300 to help you with your problem, or we'll give you more. And so you go and you sign a little piece of paper and walk out with not $300. You walk out with $300 minus their percentage. Their percentage is, if you run it out for the year, it's something like 300%. I mean, it's amazing what they're making. And so, but you're desperate. You've got to pay the bill. You've got to pay the mortgage. You've got to pay the Edison or whoever because you're desperate. And so you pay, and what happens is you get further behind. And so now when you don't have the money to pay it out, so you go to another one of those institutions and you borrow from them, and they take that same big percentage, and you come over to pay this one. And then when it's time to pay that one, you don't have the money to pay them, so you run over to another one, but you got to get twice as much, and then you run over because they get their percentage over here, and then you pay this one. Do you understand what's happening? You're desperate. These people can't feed their children. They're not supposed to sell their property. Now, there was a covenant. We're going to talk about that at the year of Jubilee in just a minute. But they weren't supposed to, but if they had to, they could. But a Jew was not supposed to charge another Jew any interest at all. So the taxes are hitting them. There's a famine that's hitting them. And Nehemiah, in verse 6, gets very angry. Why is he angry? Because they're making a living? No, because they're making a living on the backs of someone else's suffering. And they're doing it disobediently. I want you to be able to let righteous indignation rise up in you when you see someone taking advantage of someone in distress. That's a reason to be angry. I mean, all of us would rise up and go to the defense of anyone we could. If we saw a little child being hurt or abused, we would run to the child's rescue. But then we sit beside in our comfortable homes and we watch someone else who's in distress, and no one steps up and calls it out. We need to know it's right to be righteously indignant to people that are abusing and taking advantage of those who are in distress. And here it is, in a sense, a people group doing it to themselves. In the first 5 books of the Bible, God says to the Jewish people in 3 of those books, do not charge interest to your fellow brothers and sisters. Listen, in Exodus 22, God says, he's speaking to Moses, he says, if you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like a money lender and charge him no interest. You can loan him something, he's in need. So you loan him what he needs, and you don't charge him interest. Now that means it's a loan, he's to pay it back as he's able, whatever the agreement is, as he's able, pay back the loan, but not an interest. Do you understand the difference? I'm not making something on your hardship. I'm going to help you, or you're going to help me, but I'm not going to make something because you're in a place of need. So no Jew was ever to charge another Jew any interest. Okay? Deuteronomy, same thing. Chapter 23, verse 19. Do not charge your brother interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. Never charge interest to your brother. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35 says, if any one of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves among you, help them. Don't charge them. Help them as you would a foreigner. I mean, even a foreigner you would help out, right? Even a stranger that's in need, you'd help out. We do that all the time, right? Where we walk up to a place where a person is standing there in need. They're at the gas station or a restaurant. They say, hey, could you spare a buck? I need some food. And if you know it's not going to go down their throat in alcohol or something, you go, hey, let me buy you dinner. Come on over here and I'll buy you something here. We're willing to do that. Even a stranger we've never seen before, we'll never see again. We're willing to. He's saying, if you do that for a stranger, if you do that for a foreigner that doesn't belong in the land, surely for goodness sakes, you would not charge a brother, a fellow person, interest. Help them as you would a foreigner and a stranger so that they can continue to live among you instead of chasing them out. Verse 36, do not take interest or any profit from them, but fear your God. Now, that's a very interesting comment. Here, don't take interest, fear God. How's that connected? We'll see if we can understand that. So that they may continue to live among you. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit. I am the Lord your God. And what does he say about himself? Who brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. Now, I'm going to pause there before we finish this passage. He's saying to them, look, I don't want you to charge any one of your brothers interest. Why? Because the property that you have, the land that you own, the crops that you're eating, I gave you. How dare you charge someone else for something I freely gave to you? You didn't earn it. It's not owed to you. I lovingly, graciously gave it to you. How dare you take and gain more off of someone in need? Fear God. Honor God. Serve one another. How dare you? How dare you get in your heart and your mind that you are the one that earned the career, that you're the one that earned the job, that you're the one that has the brains and the talent and the ability, and that is not God-given. How dare you serve even the weakest, serve even the meekest, serve even the most needy? How dare you be so pompous as to think you have arrived and now you'll take advantage? Verse 39, if any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, talk about slavery, do not make them work as a slave. They are to be treated as a hired worker or temporary resident among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. And doesn't that already sound good? I mean, maybe we don't know what that is, but man, a year of Jubilee, hey, a year of party, a year of celebration, this sounds good. I'm not sure what that is, but whatever it is, I can't wait for it to get here. Let me pause on the year of Jubilee for it. God set it up. He gave each family, each tribe, each people group, he gave them their portions of the lands. And he said to them, on the year of Jubilee, which was supposed to be every 49th year, I believe it was, on that year, everything returned back to the family. So let's suppose that the Larkin tribe, that's my tribe, the Larkin tribe, we had, southwest Fontana. That was our area to live. But over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we were in the trouble. There was a famine, and we started selling parts of our property. And all of a sudden, Rodney's got part of it, Fred's got more of it, Mark's got some of it, and we're down to we got nothing. Now we're living, we're renting our own property because we don't own it anymore. Well, along comes the year of Jubilee. And on the year of Jubilee, all of the property goes back to the clan it belongs to. And all of a sudden, the Larkins again have a place to abide, a place to grow their crops, a place to raise their children, to feed their family, to do commerce. We have a place that belongs to us. Isn't that a way of freedom? Can't you imagine? Because people do get upside down, and people do get backwards, and people do get in positions that are really troublesome. But there was the year of Jubilee. So if, in fact, 15 years after the last Jubilee, Rodney is able to buy my property, well, he only has 49 years minus 15, and he knows that date, it comes back to me. So that's what he buys it for, the value of what it would be for that many years. You understand how it worked? So no one's getting ripped off. Rodney doesn't go, oh my gosh, I only had this for 6 months, and then it's gone. No, he knows up front when the year is coming and the value. So it was a celebration. Everybody kind of got a fresh start. Verse 41, then they and their children are to be released, and they are to go back to their own clans and to the property and to their ancestors, because the Israelites are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. They must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear God. Now, you know, we know that our God is loving and He's gracious and He's merciful. And so we get this idea, you know, you've seen the little cartoon character of God up there with lightning bolts in his hands, you know, ha ha, and he fries somebody's little fanny, right? Right? That's the whole idea. That's the fear. No, that's not the fear of God. The fear of God is the fear of breaking His heart. It's the fear of dishonoring God. It's the fear of disappointing God. That's the fear of God. I love you so much because you have abundantly poured onto me your grace and your mercy and your acceptance and your love and your understanding. You love me this much that continuously you are giving me good. You are loving and kind. I don't want to break this relationship. I don't want to break this fellowship. I don't want to break your heart. It's displeasing God. When I was in high school, my parents were told that I had done something that I had done. And they called me to account for what I had done. And I lied through my tooth. I did not admit it. They said, did you? No. And well, they say you did. I didn't. And I lied. I was so scared. I was scared, one, of the punishment, and two, the displeasing. Mostly the displeasing. Well, I lived that lie for more than a decade, almost 2 decades. And somewhere in my 30s, the Lord called me into account. Remember when you said that? Now, it wasn't that I had never remembered. I remembered plenty of times. But that time He called me into account. He said, hey, you need to deal with that. Now, my dad was a golfer, and a good one. I'm a hacker and a good hacker. I mean, I can hack it wherever it's not supposed to go. And so I called my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I'd like to take you golfing. And he said, sure. Now he had taken me golfing about once a year, and he saw that it didn't improve as he did. He still loved me. But we went golfing. I picked him up at his house, took him over to a place, and we golfed. And, of course, in my mind was to confess this sin. Hole 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 17, 18, and they call the clubhouse the 19th hole. I could not spit it out. I tried. I mean, listen, from the time he convicted me, it took me weeks to make the golf appointment. And then it took me every hole to try to muster up. And it was kind of like, and I talked about everything I could think of, but I kept thinking, you know, on my mind was, I got to say this, 19th hole, lunch is over, in the car, tell him now, in the house, tell him now. Finally, my mother, like all the women in my clan, very intuitive, she said, something on your mind? Duh. Yes. And the fact that she called the question, that's what I needed. I said, yeah, actually there is. My dad's stunned. Remember, the women are intuitive. The men were just, okay. And so, anyway, I said, yeah, I came over here because of, do you remember? Yes, I lied. And I was afraid, and actually my mother said, you know, I knew. Did I have to come over? Yes. Anyway, I left there for a moment relieved. But I got in the car and I felt terrible. Now, folks, I know that the Holy Spirit has told me to go tell my parents, and now I've told them, and I asked their forgiveness, and they have forgiven me, and we prayed together, and I got in the car, and I felt lousy. And I was so ticked at God. I'm one of these people that yells once in a while at God when I'm really ticked, and I pounded on the steering wheel. What do you want of me? I did what you asked, and I feel worse. Now, the reason I felt worse was because my fears had not been taken care of. Although my parents told me that they loved me and that they forgave me, in my heart, I didn't know if this was a game changer. I didn't know if the next time I saw them that they would love me the same way. And I feared for the weeks until I saw them again that when I walked in their house, I was like, oh yeah, there's Sinner Boy. You can sit in the corner if you'd like, or the dog, you know, he has some mess out there. I just felt like a second-class son until I walked in, and their greeting and their demeanor, their countenance, all was the same as it ever had been. I was still their beloved son. Now, I tell you that because sometimes when we're called to confession and repentance, we have the worry. I know what happens. People come to the pastor and they tell me something about their life and their history and their mess and their crud and then the next time they see me, they're looking at my eyes. They're like, he hates me, doesn't he? He thinks I'm scum. And it's like, I don't think that, but he now knows my wicked, evil secrets. And it's like, I know a lot of wicked, evil secrets, including my own. I don't need to be judge and jury in your camp. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, you're not looking at a man who has it all together, and I know I'm not looking at people that have it all together, and I hope you're not stupid enough to think the person next to you's got it all together, because they don't. Even if it's your spouse, or your best friend, or your family member. They ain't got it together either. So here we are, a cluster of sinners. Agreed? You guys are bad. No. So the idea is the fear of God is the displeasing of God. And I was abundantly afraid that I was going to displease God, displease my parents. I don't want to live that way. And I know you don't want to live that way, do you? So when we sin, we want to come back to the Father and say, Father, I've sinned. I've sinned against you. Remember the prodigal son, he returned. Father, I've sinned against you. And the dad, just graced him. He loved him. He ran to him. That's our God. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about your sin, okay? Now, it's not that I'm saying your sin as opposed to my sinlessness. Please don't hear that. But I'm bringing to us our sin, and I may hit a bingo right on your sin, okay? And I hope you don't go, because that's what we can do. When the conviction of the Spirit, I can't convict you. I don't want to convict you. That's not my business. But I certainly hope that if the Spirit of God says, hey, that one was for you, that you say, speak, Lord, your servant's listening. I know that I need the Spirit of God to run the searchlight in my heart on a regular basis and say, look, Dennis, that's not the way we're supposed to be doing things. You are not following me. You are not trusting me. You are not obeying me. This is not how I want us to do business together. This is not the relationship I've called you into. Are we understanding? So God uses Nehemiah to confront the leaders. He tells them what you're disobeying God. He calls them, remember those scriptures that we looked at in Deuteronomy and Leviticus and so on, and Exodus? He's calling them back. You know you're not supposed to do this. So he calls them to account. He tells them you're selling your own people into slavery. And they know. Remember, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers? I'm not supposed to do that. Didn't go well for those that did that. It went well for Joseph in the end. But we're not supposed to do that. And they weren't supposed to do that. And then lastly, he says, you're a terrible witness of a people group that loves and trusts me. You're ruining your testimony. In their response when he confronts them, you know what they said? Nothing. Now, I want to just say this. When God uses anyone, he might use a little child. He could use a 3-year-old. He could use somebody that's got dementia. He can use anybody. He used a talking donkey, for goodness sake, which gives me great pleasure as a pastor. But he can use anyone to speak to us, to correct us. You know, we do these things that at times. I say we, I don't know which one of the we it is, but sometimes the phone rings and our kids go into the phone, they're going to pick up the phone, and you say, if it's so-and-so, tell them I'm gone. Or whoever it is, tell them I'm not here. And little Sally picks it up and says, my mommy says she's not here. Thanks, sweetheart. They called you into account. We need that. And it could be a child, it could be a teenager, it could be that rebellious teenager that you just want to toast their little buns, that could be the one that would actually call you or me into account. Whenever someone, here it is, Nehemiah calls them to account, they are silent. I think that's a good way to process. If it's true what was said, listen with all of your being. Don't defend yourself. What are we to do when God confronts us with our sin? I'm going to give you 4 little bullets. I hope you'll get them in your little note-taking guide. Number 1 is to stop it. If we're sinning and God says, look, that's sin, the first thing we need to do is stop. He says, Nehemiah says, I, verse 10, and my brothers and the men also, lending the people money and grain, but let us stop charging interest. Here we're doing this. We're lending. We're not going to charge interest. Now, what I don't know from this is if Nehemiah is doing what he's done before. If he says we, he's really referring to you, but instead of sticking a finger in your nose, he says we. Because before he said we when he was talking about the mess that they were living in, and he comes in as a brother in that. Okay? And so I don't know whether we means that Nehemiah also was charging interest, or he's just saying, look, all of us together, it's our fault. Just like, folks, no matter what you are, Democrat, Republican, or something in the middle, or something on the edges, I don't care what you are, we as America are a we, and we as America are making some foolish choices, and we as America aren't doing everything right. Agreed? So we can say we as a nation do sinful things. And we, all of us, voting or not voting, are responsible for what's going on here. We cannot say it's the people on the other side of the aisle from us. The ones, that color, this color, can't do that. It's us, our nation, and we are participating in what we see as the destruction of our own country. Number two, not only stop it, in verse 11, is correct it. He says, give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you are charging them. Deal with it now. He doesn't say deal with it later. Folks, when God convicts us, don't do what I did. Remember the golf story? 2 weeks, I could have just said, Mom, Dad, I need to come over right now. I mean, they were a 15-minute drive. Folks, I could do that, right? I could have got in my car. No, I needed 2 weeks to ask for the golf appointment game, and then the time to have the golf game, and then the drive there, and the sit down, and the chitter chat. I just procrastinated. I was scared. Do it now. Stop it and correct it. We need to stop what we're doing that's wrong. We need to correct what we're doing. Deal with it now. Now is the time. I'm going to say this to all of us right now. If God raises an issue in your heart today, don't say, well, in the fall or in the winter or the spring or next summer, that'd be the time. No. Today. This is Sunday. Today's the day. Before lunch. Over lunch. Right after lunch. Today. We don't have to push this thing back. Today's the day. Number 3, confess it. Verse 12, we will give it back, they said. So they're making a testimony. And we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. We're going to give it back. So they've decided and they've confessed what they're going to do. So we stop it, we correct it, we confess it, and last thing is declare it. And here's what Nehemiah calls it. He says, then I summoned the priests, in verse 12, and made the nobles and the officials take an oath to do what they had promised. Do you make oaths? I'm a little cautious of making too many oaths, but I stood up one day, 35 years ago tomorrow, and said before a very large crowd of people, I, Dennis Larkin, take you, Karen Louise Smith, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, until death do us part. And I've kept it. I've kept that promise. 35 years tomorrow. I would recommend that you make public these kinds of declarations. I will no longer do that. I will forever do this. What is it that God's calling you? Stop it. Correct it. We need to be doing these things. Stop it, correct it, confess it, and declare it. If you walk into my house, we have on one of our walls a declaration that Karen and I signed probably now 15 years ago. It was kind of a restatement of our vows to love one another and to care for one another. And we signed it, and we dated it, and Jody and Stephen and my father and my mother and the family, they signed it with us. It was another public statement that this is the way we would live out our lives as a married couple. I would suggest that you consider what is the way that you publicly declare the things that need to be changed in your life. Now, there's 4 little principles. I would guess that in this crowd that there are as a large percentage of people, the large majority of people that have a money issue. Now, I don't know what the money issue is, low income, big debt, mismanagement. I don't know what it is. And I don't care to know. I mean, that's not the point. But I would bet that in here we have a lot of money issues. I want to give you, right from this passage, 4 principles that you could apply to your life. But you need to be active. You understand, coming to church and hearing good thoughts, good ideas, good principles, and not applying them is blah, blah, blah. You know, wah, 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 wah. That's all it is. So I want to encourage you as you look at this. And by the way, there are really good sources of help. What's the financial peace? Help me with it, the title. Financial Peace University is one of them. What's the other one? Crown Ministries. There are these ministries that really help people that are having struggles with money. But here's the 4 principles I got out of here. Handling our money wisely pleases God. Handling my money, handling your money wisely pleases God. What's wise? I think about the dollars that I have, and I think about what I'm going to save. I think about what I have, and I decide what I'm going to give. And I think about what I have, and I decide wisely what I'm going to spend. I think everybody needs to think about 3 pockets. You know, if you got 2 pants pockets and a shirt pocket or whatever, say, here's the money I'm giving to God, and here's the money I'm going to put in savings, and here's the money I'm going to spend on the needs of my family. We need to be thinking about that. That there'd be 3 pockets, at least 3. Maybe there's long-term savings, short-term savings, all kinds of strategies there, but we are going to spend our money wisely, and that pleases God. Number 2, personal sin can prevent God's work through us. These people were disobeying God, and the work of God stopped. You think that's the only time that ever happened in the Bible? Do you remember Joshua at the Battle of Jericho, right? And the walls come tumbling down, right? Remember that? Y'all? Oh, okay, good. Just make it. Well, they fought Jericho and saw God do a miracle. He caused the walls to implode. They just fell down, and they walked in, and they took it over, and there was treasure, gold and silver and bronze. And the Lord said to them, do not take any of the treasure, but put it into the temple treasury. And so that's what they did. And they stuck all of that. Here's people collecting somebody's gold or silver, whatever, and they're put it into the treasury of the temple, except for one guy, Achan. And when they went to the next battle, a little city, a little town called Ai, 2 letters, Ai, and they show up for this battle, they check out the land, they say, you know what, hey, Josh, we need 2,000, 3,000 max to wipe these people out. Let everybody else have the day off. I mean, we don't need to send the whole army in here. I mean, just a little cleanup crew. That's all we need there. So they send 3,000 men. 36 men die. They lose their lives. People lost their sons. They lost their husbands. They lost their fathers because back at the camp, Achan has hidden something in his tent. Well, here, people are starving. They're selling their children because they're doing it wrong. The work shuts down. Folks, that means that I can sin or you could sin, and we could shut down the progress that God has for us as a church, your ministry, our ministries. It could be shut down. It could be stopped if we're not dealing with our sin. That's big, don't you think? How would I feel if I realized because of this sin, I'm treasuring this sin that I got hidden over here in the corner? You guys aren't going to be fed. You guys are going to be led to the Lord. Our neighbors aren't going to find Christ because I'm over here with my hidden sin no one knows about, and I'm enjoying my little sin, and no one is getting to move forward in the kingdom because of me. Now, I'm not trying to put myself in a bigger position. I'm saying the same for you. What if your family isn't growing in the Lord? What if your hidden sin is destroying for generations what God wants to do? Because we are treasuring in our heart something that we will not trust God with. Handle our money wisely. It pleases God. Personal sin can prevent God's work through us. Number 3, the thing that we can hold on to is confront sin head on. When you find that you're in the wrong, admit it. I waited 15, 18 years. I'm not even sure how old I was when I went back to my parents. I think it happened when I was 17 or 18, and I went back to them when I was about 36. So it was almost the length of time I'd lived when it happened to go back and deal with it. Don't make excuses. Well, that's just the way I am. That's the way we are as a family. We're always argumentative. No, that's a choice you make. Don't excuse sin. Don't give it another name. It's a lifestyle. It's a propensity. Let's not just give it some little nice, fluffy title. Let's say, hey, you know what? I sinned. I lied. I cheated. I stole. I committed adultery. I've murdered in my heart. I've been backbiting. I've been gossiping. I've been slandering. Let's just call it what it is. Whatever it is, let's just call it out and say, that's what I have done. That's what I've been about. I've cheated on my wife. I'm sleeping around. I'm shacking up. Let's just call it what it is. Let's just say it. You understand? Not just say some fluffy thing. Rude is rude. It's not lifting your voice. Spiteful, angry, resentful, that's what it is. Let's call things what they really are. Call it straight out. In the areas of our life that we need changing, we've got to cooperate with God. Okay. I'm going to presume that some of us, including myself, have had a struggle with weight. Most of us have lived long enough to realize that just pure willpower didn't do it. Right? We've done other things. We tried the diet. We tried an exercise program. But when we do accountability, when we call us, I really need to, and I need you to partner with me, and together we can do this thing. We need the help of one another. I know the struggle I've had with weight. And I know that when I have partnered with someone, my weight has been controlled. And when I do it on my own, my weight is in control. My mouth is in control. Ice cream is in control. There are other things that get in control. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in the issues of sin, we need to confront it and we need to partner with it. We need to realize that it is an issue of character. We want to say it's the way my family raised me. We're all like that. It's genetically, so I would say I'm Irish. You might say, well, I'm Italian, I'm Spanish, I'm Filipino, I'm such and such. And we're all that way. Baloney. You're human. I don't care whether you're pink or green or orange, okay? It's not about the skin color or your ethnicity or your heritage. It's about your decision, my decision. It's about what we choose. I just think that public declarations are powerful. We say to somebody else, this is what I need to do, this is what I'm about, and you can hold me accountable to that. Changes start to happen. How serious is God about our sin and disobedience? I would say he's very serious. Listen to Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 13. I'm going to read it from a different translation. This is CEV. Then I emptied my pockets and said, if you don't keep your promise, that's what God will do to you. He will empty out everything you own, even taking away your houses. Okay. We're going to get gritty here. If you're doing something illegal, stop it. If you're doing something immoral, stop it. If you're doing something unethical, stop it. If you're doing something that you would not want everyone else to know about, stop it. And some of you are saying, Dennis, I've tried. We have things called addictions, and we now, in our society, in our era, we have addictions almost to everything. I mean, there are probably iPod addictions, okay? We got addiction. Then we do this. We declare it, we stop it, we make ourselves accountable, we give the thing away. We deal with it. We say, I have an addiction to alcohol or drugs or pornography or spending or lying or whatever it is. And we call ourselves out and we say, Chris, I need you to keep me accountable. Mike, I need you to walk with me. Dean, help me out here. I need you to partner with me as I'm going through my struggle. I need to deal with this because, folks, it's destroying our lives and it's destroying our ministries. Chuck Swindoll tells the story of an Upper St. Clair in Pennsylvania. The city built a brand new police and fire department station. Big, beautiful building. great day of dedication. It was kind of state of the art. And after just a couple of months, some of the windows began to stick. Just couldn't open them very easy. And a few months later, the doors began to jam, and they couldn't get the doors open. And then there began to be cracks in the floor, and cracks in the walls, and cracks in the ceiling. And finally, they had to put a sign on the building, condemned, not fit for public use. They had to tear it down. Brand new building. What caused that? They had to do some investigation to find out that miles and miles away, they were doing underground blasting for some other kind of project, and it was sending a ripple effect that destroyed this building, made it unsafe for public use. There can be underground, hidden sins in our lives that are blasting away the foundation and destroying our marriage and destroying our testimony. And one day it will be stamped on our lives, unfit for public use. King Solomon, unfit for public use. King Saul, unfit for public use. Televangelist after televangelist, unfit for public use. Pastor, teacher, elder, board member, Sunday school teacher, whatever, they're scattered all over the globe, unfit for public use. Husband, wife, unfit for public use because of hidden sins under the ground, destroying the foundation. We have to deal with it now. Now is the time. And if you got, as I'm talking to you, your heart's pounding going, oh my God, we cannot face my hidden stuff. If we don't face it now, it's just more destruction. Then we wind up in a situation where the secret is about to come out, and literally they do suicide by cop. Unfit for public use. That's where it leads. I've heard the phrase, what parents do in moderation, children may do in excess. So if I don't guard my mouth and I just let a word fly here, another word fly there, another word fly at another time, my children are learning that's the way to talk. And if I say, hey, we're just not going to report this thing, I'm going to be paid under the table, or whatever it might be, then we're teaching our children that's the way. We can't trust God. See, I'm going to get paid under the table because I can't trust God. You understand that? God is not trustworthy because he said a way to do it, and I'm not going to do that because that would mean I wouldn't be able to feed my family. That's a lie from the pit of hell. So we're doing something illegal. We're doing something that's scamming the IRS or whatever it may be that we might be doing that is not the way God would call it out. Immoral, illegal, unethical, deceptive. It's just a little lie. How's your foundation? If your kids build on your foundation, will it be safe for them to live in 20 years? They follow after you, and they do more of the same than you do. Will they be healthy, godly men and women? Will they raise your grandchildren the way you hope that they would be raised, or will they raise them differently? Charles Spurgeon said, if you come to the Lord early, you will be saved. You will be saved 1,000 regrets. He said, Dennis, why did you throw that in here? Because on the other side of that wall is a room full of children. Some of them know the Lord, some of them don't. Those that know the Lord are being parented by us. Those that don't know the Lord are being parented by us. And I wonder, when it's time for them to raise their children, will they have what they need? And one of the things that concerns me is that we as a church struggle. We struggle with getting enough people back there. And I think, are our priorities that messed up? Why is it that that is not the number one place we all want to be? To change the life of a child. To invest, to pray, to love, to hug, to teach, to help. Why isn't it that way? I remember years ago in the children's ministry at Grace Community Church, I remember my mom and dad working themselves silly. They were spending collectively about 65 hours a week volunteers to run that children's ministry. And one day my dad got hurt. He's an old man, and he's hoisting these big, heavy tables out of the way and back in where they belong. And one day he stumbled and fell, and that table crashed on his shins, and he was there on the ground. He couldn't even himself up. Old man. When I found out that happened, I was furious because I thought there are able-bodied men in this church that don't give a whatever you want to say to help this old man and this old lady do this ministry. I was so angry. I just about quit being a pastor. I wanted to step up the next week and say, I'm not preaching again until this ministry is covered. That's what was in my heart. I didn't do that. That would not have been the way God would wanted me to react. But I just want you to know the righteous indignation that can well up when something isn't the way it should be. And in our church, something that isn't the way it should be is the manpower being provided for our children's ministry. It's not right. It's not. So I didn't intend to bring that to the table. I just feel like that was something the Lord wanted right here, right now. And I don't want that to distract you from what God may be talking to you about in your heart, because in your heart right now, it might be adultery. It might be deception of your spouse. It might be getting paid under the table. It might be, I don't know what it might be. And I don't want you to get distracted from there. But I'm asking you on that other line item for a moment that you would become a person in our church involved in seeing the need met, whatever that means. I believe that God called you here today to do some processing. And I don't know whether there's a big issue or a little issue, whether there's blasting underground that's destroying your foundation, or there's little places that you're willing to not face. But I'm calling us as a church to be a people who are holy and repentant and submissive to God. Let's pray. Father, I don't know what you want to say to each of us, but I'm asking that you give us ears to hear. I don't know what you're doing individually. But Lord, for me, I ask that you would search me and that you would show me any way that is wicked, any way that is selfish, any way that is pride-filled. Would you search me? And God, please, help me to walk out my life honoring you.